Hello and welcome to chapter 19 of this Flutter course. In the previous chapter, we worked on logout. And after we completed logout, you saw that we went to the login screen and that it wasn't really working as it should. In that what it was doing is that it was logging you in with Firebase and it was printing the user credentials to the debug console or basically the console, and we were seeing the logs, but the login view wasn't actually going to the nodes view. So as you can see here, it says the login view doesn't route properly. It just stays there and does nothing upon successful login. And that's exactly what we're going to address in this chapter. This chapter is going to be quite a short one because all we're basically doing is just doing some cleanup, and we're going to go from the login screen to the login view to the nodes view, and we're going to remove some print statements. And this is like what is going to happen as you become more and more of a software developer, and that sometimes you do the heavy lifting, as we did in the previous chapter. We took care of logout, and you learned a lot about new classes, like the buttons and the menus and unpressed of those menu items. And then after you've done that, you'll probably spend some time to clean up the code. And this is one of those chapters that we're going to do clean up. So let's have a look at the first thing that we need to remedy, and that is our print statements. Let's have a look at the code. I'm going to bring up our code. So I think we call it my notes. So here I think is the right window. And I'm going to get rid of the debug console right there. And I'm going to bring up strcpy, which I have somewhere around here. Okay, so you can see in login view, we have quite a lot of print statements at the moment. They just say print user not found, wrong password, user credentials, and etc. And we also have a register view here, which has a few print statements. So let's go and remedy this and use log as we talked about it before. So let's say I'm going to change the view layout here so you see the code a little bit better. Let's go and use log. And if you don't know the difference between log and print, I strongly suggest that you watch the previous chapters where we talked about this and why it is actually advised to use log instead of print. And log in itself isn't perfect. It has its like problems, but not problems, maybe downsides or things that you need to be aware of. And I highly suggest that you read the documentations for log as well. But in this case, as you can see, it's also suggested by the analyzer not to use print. So we're going to change that to both in the login view and register view. We're going to change that to using log. So let's go ahead and say import Dart developer as DevTools show log. All right, I'm going to copy paste this in here as well. And at the same time, I'm going to clean up the code a little bit in register view. All right. Okay, we've done the import in login view and register view. I'm going to save those. And now let's go to the login view and remove all these print statements and instead just say DevTools log. And we're just going to say user credential to string. Okay, remember, print can print an object. If you look at the information for print here, excuse me, you can see the function signature says that I can print an optional object, which is kind of peculiar that it can print an optional object. I mean, does it mean that I don't have to actually pass a parameter? No, it has a positional argument, but that argument can be null. So I could say string value is null like this, like an optional, and just pass that here. So and it will still work. That's what it means. So it can accept an optional object. And remember, every object has a function called toString. So this toString function is actually coming from object. So we can command click on it, and you'll see that, let's see, this is the toString of user credential. But if we look at, if we create, for instance, how do I explain the toString and where it comes from? Let's do it like this. Let's say we have an object, optional object value, and that is null. Now I can say value to string. You see, there's a function there. So these are the functions and properties that any object exposes. And every class in Dart is implicitly a subclass of object, including user credential, meaning that user credential has inherited the toString function from the object class. However, if you looked at the source code for this particular toString, you can see it comes from package firebase auth.dart, meaning that user credential, this class, has overwritten the functionality of toString, meaning that it is returning its own string to represent itself. All right. And that's this long string that we saw actually. We can't see it now, but let me see if I can log in here so you see it. Poof. And you see this user credential that is printed right here. Let me change the screen layout a little bit. So this user credential. So this is being printed, or this is being returned and calculated by the toString function on user credential. And you can see it looks like this: user credential and then additional information, and then prints the additional information. And that's exactly what you can see here. You see additional user info, and then there's credential, which I believe it should be somewhere around here. Is anonymous user here, credential, that's the key, and then another one called user. And where could that be? It's somewhere in here. I can't see it really, but it should be somewhere in here. User password. I mean, to be honest with you, if you copied this, like if I actually copied this and brought it into its own file and search for user, boom, boom, let's see. It's a little bit strange that it's all in one line, but that's okay too. I'm going to search for user, boom. And that is the user information. You can see user is user, display name, etc. So that's toString. Okay, the reason I'm explaining all of this is because you need to know that print can print an object, but log can't. Log needs a string. So if you look at the function signature, it says, give me a message of type string, okay? So that's what we're doing here. We're saying devtools log and then user credentials toString. You need to do the toString, okay? So go ahead, copy this devtools log, and then let's change all these print statements to say that that's what needs to be printed now, or logged. Change all of those in your login view so that you don't have any more warnings here related to print, okay? Save your login view and then go to register view and do the exact same thing. So user credentials needs to be toString. And for weak password, do the same thing. Email, do the same thing, and then invalid email entered. And we have no other print statements. And what you could do, I mean, I hadn't planned for this in my notes here. I don't see anywhere that I'd planned for that, but I think we could just improvise a little bit. And what I really like to do when I'm doing like cleanups like this in my source code, I like to go and make sure that there's no print statement anywhere else, because it just feels like when you're cleaning up your code, especially if you're doing something as simple as what we're doing here, it is worth spending maybe just a few more seconds and making sure that you're applying the same cleanup in the entire source code. Now, sometimes your source code may be so big and complicated that you changing even a simple bit of code may affect the source code in such a way that you may not know if you're breaking it or anything. So, and for that, we need tests, unit tests, widget tests, etc. But if that is the case, you don't have to do that. But in this case, since our application is so new, we've just created it, there's not much logic in it, I think it's worth maybe just doing a Command-Shift-F in Visual Studio Code on Mac, or Control-Shift-F in Visual Studio Code on Linux and Windows, just to go to this global search and just search for print. And I can see here that we don't have any print left in our source code, so we don't have to change anything else. All the prints seem to have been in the login view and in the register view, so don't worry about that anymore, okay? All right, that was for our prints. So now what we need to do is to ensure that, basically we need to now focus on what we wanted to do in this chapter. That was a side, kind of like a side note there to clean up our print statements. What we need to do in this chapter to make sure that we can go from the login view to the notes view, I believe, is what we created in the one of the previous chapters. Is it here in the main Dart, perhaps? Let's see. Notes view, yeah. So let's do that. And you remember from the previous chapters where we don't need the DevTools log here. Okay. If you remember from one of the previous chapters where we talked about named routes, and named routes, as you can see, they're defined in the main function. Now remember, the main function does not get recompiled when you do a hot reload. Keep that in mind. So we're now going to modify our routes and allow and create a new route. As you can see here, that is called notes. Actually, it should be notes slash. So I'm going to hide this caption uh, and change it so that it is actually accurate, like that. And I'm going to bring it up again so you see the correct route that we have to create. Okay, so let's go in here and create a new route for our notes. And anybody who then that tries to push this route on the screen will get the notes view appear on their screen. Okay, so let's just say as a string, notes slash as the caption suggests, and then you have to provide. Remember, the routes was a map where the keys were strings and the values had to be functions that accept the build context and return a widget. It's a little bit of a strange syntax, but you'll get used to it. So the value should accept the build context, as you can see here, and it should return a widget. So in this case, we return the notes view, okay, as a constant. Okay, that part is done now. So what we need to do now is to ensure that upon pressing the login view, upon pressing the login button, that we are doing a code similar to what we did in, if you look here in our login view, when we went to register, do you remember this navigator of context, push name and remove until? Okay. So we need to do that. And when we do this, when we did this initially, when we worked with push named and remove until, I don't think I actually explained entirely what push named and remove until does, to be honest. So I'll do that now. As its name suggests, it pushes a route on the screen. So it says that you have a screen and you want to push something on top of it. Okay, so pushing is something that is very popular in mobile development because a mobile screen, usually, I mean, after iOS came, it became very popular that you had a screen, you press the button, and another screen got pushed on top of that screen. So this has been available, I mean, in many other places. Even web browsers are now doing it these days, and even Nokia phones in the good old days were doing the same thing, but it wasn't as popular back then, and it wasn't like coined as a term of pushing until iOS and Android became more and more popular back in 2007. So pushing is the concept of having a screen and then moving and pushing physically another screen on top of it. Okay, so that's what push means in push name. All right, the named part of this function means that you have a named route. So you have defined a route somewhere, such as your main screen here, and you are trying to push that using its name. So you're not just pushing a new widget out of nowhere. Okay, so that's what the name means. Now, the part that says and remove until, what it says is, if you have, for instance, one screen here, another one is pushed on top of it, and now you want to push another one on the screen, what the remove until says, it says, if you want to push this one on the screen, I'm going to give you the chance to get rid of the existing screen on the stack. So I remove these first, and then I'll push yours. And this is kind of useful for instance, if you're, let's say you have a login view, and then you press the login button, and in our case, when the user credentials are correct, if we then want to go to the notes view, we don't have to keep this login view on the screen. So if this login view is here, what we could do is to push the notes view on top of it. So notes view is always sitting here, but then you, as a programmer, not the user, but as a programmer, you'll always know that the login view is sitting behind this. So that's not so good, because once you're logged in and you're on the notes view, you don't need this view anymore. You don't need the login view sitting there consuming memory. So that's what remove until does, because it gives you the opportunity. It passes you see a route of dynamic, and it says, let me know when you want me to stop removing things from the screen before I push yours. And us returning false basically says, just remove everything. don't care about the routes that are on the screen at the moment, and don't care about the routes that you're telling me about. Just remove everything and go to this register view, okay? All right, that was a lot of information. Hopefully you got that. So now what we need to do is to go to our login view, which we are right now. And upon getting our user credentials here, what we need to do is to send the user to the main UI. So I'm just going to check in my notes that I've explained everything to you before we go forward. And yeah, that seems to be the case. So let's then go ahead and do that. Right here, what we're going to do is going to get rid of this DevTools log here, okay? So let's then go in here and say navigator of, and remember we have a build context, and we're going to say push name and remove until like this. And our new route name is actually, what's it called? Notes, I think we call it, right? In here, yeah, /notes/. So put that in there, and in here you could just say return false. Okay. Now, this is one thing I haven't mentioned in the previous chapters, but in Dart, it is very important that you always suffix your parameter values with a comma. And a comma, you can see here, is placed usually between parameters, but also the last parameter is suggested to have a comma, because as you can see here, the Dart formatter right now isn't really able to break these two parameters into two separate lines of code, and that's what we usually do in Dart. You can see here, for instance, when we did the await on Firebase instance sign in the last parameter we had a comma. If I remove that, the code will actually be a little bit uglier in this. It looks like this. But if you put a comma at the end of your last parameter, Dart is able to break your parameters, each parameter and its value into its own line. And that's like a usual convention in Dart. So if you see something like this that doesn't look quite right, put a comma at the end of the last parameter and press Command S for Dart formatter to be able to format your code. Okay, great. We've done that now. And at the moment, we're not using the user credentials at all. So what we could do, to be honest with you, is to get rid of that. So all we'll do is we say Firebase instance sign in with email and password, okay? And that's it, because this whole thing is in a try block. So if this thing doesn't work properly, then we'll come here, okay? Now, you may think, well, this is great, actually. Now we're going to go from our login view to the notes view. But you'll be a bit disappointed to see that this isn't going to work as it should. So let me change the UI a little bit here and then press the login button. And you'll see we get an error here that says, unfortunately, an unknown route was not set. It's quite cute that they say unfortunately in the actual error logs. So that's what this caption also tells you. You see, I talked about it a little bit before when we kind of started with this chapter, that we said that we're going to put the the notes name route in the main function. But I told you that this isn't going to really work so well. The reason is, again, the main function isn't going to rebuild when you do hot reload. So in order for your changes in the main function to take effect, you need to do a hot restart. So what is happening here is that you've defined everything correctly. Everything is done right. There's nothing wrong in the code itself. It's just the way we are executing the code that is wrong. And now you have to do a hot restart for Flutter to be able to pick up your changes in the main function as well. Okay, so hot reload is not going to do it. So you need to do a hot restart. So I'm going to do a hot restart here. We come here, and now you see we're in the hello world because we are actually logged in from the previous section. I'm going to log out, and we come here. Now I'm going to enter my details, foo_bar_baz, and please don't use foo_bar_baz as your password. I'm just doing it for the sake of simplicity. And now we say login, and you see that by doing login, we come to the main UI of the application. So, and as you saw, pushing in Android using material design isn't the same thing as pushing on iOS. Let me demonstrate it one more time for you so you'll have a good look at it. In the login view, enter your information. foo bar baz, and then do login. And before you do that, just make sure that you're focusing very well on the screen. I'm gonna bring it up a little bit more so you'll see it better. Look how this main UI of the application won't actually be pushed, but it instead will be kind of like moved from the bottom of the screen to the top while the previous screen gets faded away. So focus on the screen, please. Did you see that? So iOS and Android are going to work differently, but the concept is the same. So now that the main UI is pushed to the screen or an Android is displayed on the screen, the login view has disappeared and been removed from the view stack. Okay. So that's great. That's all we had to do in this chapter. So I hope actually you are happy with the results and that we didn't have to do too much. Now, what we need to do also, we need to make sure that we do like we did in the other chapters. So let's go ahead and let's go and commit and tag our changes. All right. So if you look at our tag, if you say git tag, we have now step 1, 2, 3, and in this chapter we're going to commit our changes and tag it with the tag name of step 4. So if you look at git log, we did step 3 in the previous chapter. Now we're going to do step 4. So let's say git add all, and you can see it was just a few files that we changed. Now let's I'm going to change the screen layout. I'm also going to say git commit step 4. Okay. And now let's tag it as well. Let's push our changes to GitHub, and also let's push our tags like this. So if you say git tag now we have 4 tags. And if we do git log, you'll see we have step 2, 3, and 4, and the initial commit, which is step 1. All right. Well done. That was great work for this chapter. Quite a short chapter and sweet. And now we need to get ready for the next chapter. As you can see in the caption here, it says we need to clean up our routes since they're everywhere. And that means that you can see here, we've defined our routes, login, register, nodes, but also in the login view, we're like redefining. We're saying that actually not redefining. We're trying to like go to the nodes route, but we're typing the entire route name again. And this is usually in programming not a good idea. Like if you have strings flying all over the place, like one is defined in the main Dart, the other one is called in the login view, and something similar is used, for instance, in the register view, as you can see here. Usually this means that you need to bring these into one central place and kind of reuse them. And that is exactly what we're going to do in the next chapter. So let's just leave it like this, and I'll see you in the next chapter.